This set of notes covers effectively what's in the Constitution. How's the national government set up? So we've covered the Articles of Confederation, our first government, why it was weak, and all the problems that resulted because of it. We've covered the Constitutional Convention and some of the compromises and debate that went into writing up the Constitution. We've covered the ratification of the Constitution and the Federalists arguing with the Anti-Federalists, finally agreeing to add a Bill of Rights, and the Constitution being accepted by the states. So this set of notes is going to get into more of the nuts and bolts of what's actually in the Constitution. So first off, the Constitution the document itself is broken into three different parts. The first part is called the preamble. And this is basically the opening paragraph of the Constitution, right? Pre means before, so use that to help you remember before what? Before the main body. Okay, this is the introduction. And it sets the goals and the purpose for the new government that we wrote. So it has those things like establish justice, promote domestic tranquility, secure the blessings of liberty, broad goals for our new government to try to achieve. After the preamble comes the main body of the Constitution, and those are called the Articles. And there's 7 of them, but the first 3 are sort of the bread and butter of the government. They establish the structure of the government, including the 3 branches of government. After the Articles comes the amendments, and the amendments are simply changes that we have made to the Constitution over time. A couple important principles that we've talked about before, but we're going to put them in the notes again. So the fact that they're going in our notes again lets you know that these are really things you need to know. Separation of power is built into our Constitution. Right? We separate power into 3 equal branches of the government. And we keep them equal through checks and balances. The Constitution gives each branch, all 3 of them, a way to check or block the other 2, so that one branch doesn't get too powerful. It doesn't dominate. So let's talk about the 3 branches. The first branch, and it's listed first in the Constitution because the Founding Fathers felt that this was probably the most important branch. It's the one that's closest to the people, and that's the legislative branch. So the legislative branch is made up of Congress, and its job is to make laws, to write laws. Congress consists of 2 different houses or 2 different chambers, the House of Representatives on one side and the Senate on the other. In the House of Representatives, there are 435 members. And we've talked about this before. In the House, each state's number of representatives is determined by its population. So states with more people get more representatives. They serve for 2-year terms and then have to be reelected. You must be at least 25 years old to run for the House of Representatives. And you must be a U.S. citizen for at least 7 years to run for the House of Representatives. On the other side of Congress is the Senate. In the Senate, there are 100 members, because each state gets 2. Every state is equal in the Senate. Every state gets 2, no matter how big or small. 50 states times 2, 100 members. Senators serve for 6-year terms. You must be at least 30 years old to serve in the Senate. And you must be a U.S. citizen for at least 9 years. Article 2 of the Constitution sets up the executive branch. And the executive branch is led by the president. His main job is to enforce the laws that Congress passes. The president serves for a 4-year term. The president can be reelected once. The president has to be at least 35 years old. And the president has to be a native-born American citizen. Now, that doesn't mean you have to be born in America. You have to be born as an American citizen. So if you were born in another country and you come to America and become a citizen, you cannot run for president. You have to be born as an American citizen. The third branch of our government is the judicial branch. And the judicial branch consists of the Supreme Court and the lower federal courts. And the main job of the judicial branch is to interpret the laws. Judges are appointed for life. And they can't be fired, and their salary can't be lowered just because they issue an unpopular ruling. So this gives them some freedom. They can make decisions that they think are best without worrying about making Congress mad or making the president mad, because they can't be fired and they can't have their pay lowered either. This brings us to the issue of checks and balances. We just talked about what the three branches are, what their jobs are. Well, how do they keep each other in check? How do they keep each other from getting too powerful? Well, Congress can overturn a president's veto. Congress can also impeach and remove the president from office if he does something really bad. And Congress can approve or block nominees to the judicial branch. So they have ways to limit the power of the president and the court. The president can veto bills that were passed by Congress. So he can block them. He can say, no, I don't think they're good. He also gets to pick Supreme Court justices. So there's two of his important checks on the other branches. And what about the Supreme Court? Well, the Supreme Court can overturn laws that were passed by Congress if they think they're unconstitutional. And they can also overturn actions of the president. So if the president does something and the court rules that it goes against the Constitution, then it's overturned. The last thing we're going to talk about is the amendment process. And so why do we even have it? Well, the government, the writers of the government, the Constitution, we wanted it to be able to change with the times. Okay? So the writers of the Constitution give us a way to add amendments, changes to the Constitution. How does that work? Well, an amendment has to be proposed by a 2/3 vote of both houses of Congress. So the House of Representatives and the Senate have to pass an amendment by a 2/3 vote. And if they both do it, then the amendment is proposed. Now the amendment has to go to the state legislatures to be ratified or approved. And if 3/4 of the states approve the amendment, then it gets added to the Constitution. So again, we have these amendments because we need our government to be able to change as the country changes. Now, getting 2/3 of Congress and 3/4 of the states to agree on something is really hard, and it takes a long time, and it was intentionally set up that way so that any changes that we do make have to be really, really important changes, and we make sure that they're not silly changes or unimportant. They have to be important, and it helps our government to stay stable. We don't want the government changing, every year, every other year. We want it to be stable, right? Like a house with a good foundation is going to be strong, but we also wanted it to have a little bit of flexibility so we could change it if we needed to.